Chairperson, delegates, it is a great privilege for me to bring you this report for what is our 48th annual delegate conference, and you are all very welcome here to Wexford. Unfortunately, I have to open my address to you pointing out for the second year in a row that Minister Daly has failed yet again to attend our conference. So once again, it is a no-show from the Minister of State with responsibility for mental health and older people, despite our invitation that went to him months ago. I think it is not unreasonable for us to take this as an affront to the P&A and by implication to psychiatric nurses who are by far the largest stakeholders in the delivery of mental health services. We can take the absence of any minister today as an indication of the lack of priority placed on the mental health service by the government. This year has been a particularly challenging year for the union, with two disputes ongoing: the nursing recruitment and retention dispute and our ambulance personnel branch NASRA dispute in relation to the HSE's refusal to permit our NASRA members the right to be represented by the union of their choice, the P&A. I will address the NASRA dispute later in this report. Delegates, as you are aware, recruitment and retention of nurses in the mental health services has been a huge issue for many years, with services carrying high levels of vacant posts, 20% plus in some areas. This has resulted in an unsustainable reliance on agency and overtime. The outcome of our dispute in 2016 produced significant measures to resolve the recruitment and retention crisis. However, despite these measures, the full scale of the crisis has not abated and has in fact worsened, with a 40% increase in vacancies from 500 in November 2017 to 700 in August 2018. Alongside this, we have witnessed a continuous hemorrhage of new graduates to overseas and the private sector. And of course, there is the other elephant in the room, with some 34% of psychiatric nurses eligible to retire by 2021. A key component of the Public Service Pay Agreement 2018 to 2020 was an assurance that the Public Service Pay Commission would examine the recruitment and retention crisis in nursing. The process commenced in October 2017 and the Commission published its report in September 2018, where it concluded that it is not persuaded, based on the evidence available, that current pay arrangements are in themselves a significant impediment to recruitment. Well, they got that wrong for sure. So on the backside of their wrong-headed conclusion, the only recommendations in relation to pay were a 20% increase in both location and qualification allowances and a reduction in the eligibility criteria for senior staff nurse from 20 years to 17 years. The Commission indicated that the post-2011 entry scale would be addressed imminently. The new entrance salary scale proposal was also issued in September 2018 with two separate interventions, that is, at point 4 and point 8 being bypassed. At an NEC on the 26th of September 2018, the Commission report and the new entry scale were discussed and a motion was adopted to ballot on the above proposed measures. The outcome of the ballot, as we all know, was a 94% rejection. A further NEC was held in November 2018, at which a motion to ballot for industrial action up to and including strike was adopted. The ballot was in pursuit of our claim for an increase in measures to sufficiently address the recruitment and retention crisis in nursing. 95% voted in favour of this ballot. Our campaign of action commenced on the 31st of January with 5 days where P&A members did not make themselves available to work additional hours. Notice was also given at that time to take strike action on the 12th, 13th and 14th of February. The withdrawal of goodwill in relation to working additional hours caused major problems, with the closure of community facilities and a number of areas, resulting in our members being unable to take up duty due to insufficient availability of staff. We witnessed services such as the Phoenix Centre, St Eda's, Portlaoise, Mullingar and Cork, to name but a few, where nurses had to remain on duty for many hours because in the absence of overtime, they were unable to be relieved from duty. I want to commend the branch officials and members for their hard work and early morning meetings and resolve during these difficult days. This action clearly demonstrated beyond doubt the unsustainable reliance on overtime to maintain services. On Saturday, the 9th of February, 3 days before the commencement of our strike action, the country witnessed the largest nurses' rally in the history of the state, with 50,000 in attendance. The attendance of P&A members, supported by numerous past members, was phenomenal. I want to commend all of you, the members and the branch officials, for your organisation in turning out at such a large attendance. I particularly want to extend my appreciation and gratitude to Miss Emma Purcell, a newly qualified member from Kilkenny, who addressed the rally and outlined the impact of the recruitment and retention crisis from the perspective of a newly qualified nurse. She was fantastic and was evidence, if it was needed, of the strength of commitment and resolve we have in our new graduates who want to make a real impact in our mental health services, if they are given the opportunities to do so. The day before the rally, the INMO had been called in for exploratory discussions by the Labour Court, and this was reconvened on the Saturday and over the weekend. It culminated in a Labour Court recommendation on Monday, the 11th of February. The P&A were not party to these negotiations or encompassed by the Labour Court recommendation. We were called in by the Labour Court on Monday, the 11th of February, under Section 26(5) of the Industrial Relations Act 1990. This pertains to the situation whereby no party having requested an investigation of dispute by the court was of the opinion that there were exceptional circumstances which warranted the court investigating the dispute. The court referred the matter back for engagement between the parties, and to facilitate this engagement with the employer, our 3-day strike action, due to commence the following day on Tuesday the 12th, was suspended. The Labour Court recommendation of February the 11th was used as the parameter for our engagement both in direct talks and in talks under the auspices of the WRC. We reconvened for a Labour Court hearing on the 20th of February, at which the court heard both sides in relation to the dispute. The court outlined that both parties re-engage and, if required, under the auspices of the WRC, to resolve outstanding issues prior to returning to the court. And among the issues outstanding were the numbers of A&P posts, the review of the area dons, allowances, and the measures required to attain the recommended enhanced nurse grade. Following engagement in relation to the above, on March the 1st, a draft enhanced nurse contract was presented, and the employer was informed in no uncertain terms that this contract was totally unacceptable from numerous perspectives. It was presented as a 19-page contract, but numerous elements of the contract were contrary to recruitment and retention. They would, in effect, worsen the terms and conditions of nurses and act as a deterrent to recruitment. Our position was submitted in writing to the employer on the 8th of March, and following a Labour Court hearing on the 3rd of April in relation to the INMO court recommendation, a number of changes to the contract which removed a substantial number of unacceptable elements. Since then, we have been negotiating in relation to an enhanced nurse contract applicable in mental health and other elements in relation to a final proposal. Colleagues, I have set out the details of our recruitment and retention campaign because I think it is important that you have the full story of just how we have come to our present position in these negotiations. But what you can also see is the lack of urgency shown by the employer over the past few weeks to address this dispute and bring a resolution to it so that we can go on with the vitally important business of delivering our mental health services and implementing the reforms that these services are crying out for. If anything, the lethargy in bringing these negotiations to a conclusion demonstrates once again the government's disregard in relation to the provision of mental health services. This dispute will be addressed in a more detail in the allocated session this afternoon, which I want to point out is going to be a closed session, so it will be only for delegates only. Colleagues, I need hardly remind you that our P&A ambulance personnel branch, NASRA, have been in dispute with the HSE since last October. The catalyst for this dispute was when the HSE unilaterally refused to deduct union subscriptions for new NASRA members from January 2018, and in August 2018 ceased deduction of all NASRA members. It is my contention that this action by the HSE was for no other reason than to halt the growth of this branch, as the membership has been consistently growing year on year since the establishment of the branch in 2010. This high-handed and cynical action by the HSE was immediately seen by NASRA members for what it was, and in fact has only resulted in a strengthening of the resolve of these workers to have their fundamental right to be members of the P&A. A ballot was conducted in September 2018 on the following issues: refusal by the HSE to deduct union subscriptions at source on behalf of ambulance personnel members of the Psychiatric Nurses Association; refusal by the HSE to engage in negotiations with the P&A when representing the interests of their ambulance personnel members; and refusal by the HSE to recognise the Psychiatric Nurses Association as union representatives for ambulance personnel members. Phase 1 of this industrial action commenced on the 10th of October 2018 and consisted of strict compliance with health and safety legislation. Phase 2 involved a withdrawal of goodwill, with members not making themselves available to work additional hours. Despite the above phases of industrial action, the HSE still refused to engage. This left our members with no option but to proceed to strike action in conjunction with Phase 1. To date, there have been 6 one-day strikes, ranging from the 22nd of January, 15th of February, 28th of February, March the 1st, and April the 2nd and 10th. Throughout this dispute, we have received strong support and solidarity from the public and from colleagues in other unions within the National Ambulance Service. Despite our best efforts, the HSE has refused to engage with this union at any level on this issue, except through correspondence containing legal threats of injunction. I think we've been threatened 6 times at this stage, and threats of sanctions against our members through the HSE retained legal company. Inconceivably, the contingency plans for strike action plans for strike days have been conducted by the HSE's legal firm rather than through the normal process of direct engagement with the union. This is in clear breach of the HSE's dispute resolution framework, which states both sides will endeavour to ensure the first meeting to agree contingency arrangements will take place within 48 hours of the notice being served. The matter was referred by the P&A to the Workplace Relations Commission last December, and to date the HSE have refused 3 requests from the WRC to engage. Apart from the clear abdication of responsibility by the HSE to attempt to resolve this issue by negotiation, we view their approach, with their ridiculous over-reliance on expensive outside legal advice, as a significant abuse of public funding. In our campaign, we have received political support from all opposition parties and independents who view this dispute as hinging on the issue of the fundamental right to join and be represented by the union of your choice. We staged a very well-attended protest outside the Dáil on the 27th of March, at which large numbers of politicians showed their support. That morning, over 60 of our members were in the gallery in the Dáil for leaders' questions, where the dispute was raised with the Taoiseach. The dispute is raised in the Oireachtas almost on a weekly basis at this stage, over the past few months. And again, we are bringing this dispute to the gates of the Dáil on the 15th of May at 1 p.m. In a further major escalation of our industrial action, we will be holding a series of 24-hour strikes in the coming weeks. The NASA dispute is happening against the backdrop of a recent staff survey conducted by the HSE, which showed that 51% of National Ambulance Service employees experienced discrimination, and an amazing 70% experienced or witnessed bullying and harassment. These are appalling findings and show a service in turmoil, a service where our members continue to be denied a voice, and a management that must be radically changed in order to deliver a high-quality service for the public. If anything, our dispute reflects this bullying endemic starkly, with the HSE using every effort to deny our members freedom of association and representation. The resolve and determination of our members is very strong, and we will continue this campaign until our members are permitted to be represented by the union of their choice, that is, the P&A. Colleagues, the intransigent position of the HSE in relation to this dispute is not only an affront to our ambulance personnel members, it's an affront to all P&A members, and it should also be seen as an affront to all trade unions and workers in this country. It is time we heard from other trade unions in support of our ambulance personnel and the determined and courageous stand they have taken in defence of a basic working and trade union demand. How can the HSE say they do not recognise our branch when we are negotiating with the health service for 49 years? Colleagues, at a time when trade union membership is now not an option for workers in many sectors of the economy, we can be proud of the P&A and NASRA's stand in support of the basic trade union rights for highly professional and dedicated frontline emergency health workers. Nothing less is acceptable, and it is imperative we fight this challenge in solidarity and show this solidarity by attending the protest on the 15th of May in large numbers and also on the picket lines. I want to commend Tony Gregg, the branch secretary, Sinead McGrath, the chairperson, and all the committee for their resilience, determination and hard work over this past year, and in particular the last 6 months. They and the branch members have remained united and strong despite the resistance they face from the employer on a regular basis. This bullying of our members must stop. Colleagues, I am sure you are all aware of the disturbing headlines in recent weeks regarding the state of the mortuary facilities in University Hospital, Waterford. It serves to remind us that our CHO5 branches in Kilkenny and Waterford have been involved in industrial action for over 12 months at this stage in relation to overcrowding in the acute units of these hospitals. This overcrowding has resulted in the indignity of service users having to resort to sleeping on mattresses and chairs. Due to this action and the determination and resilience of our members to have service users treated with dignity, comfort and respect, some measures have been put in place to alleviate this totally unacceptable practice. However, I've also written to the Mental Health Commission in relation to these scandalous circumstances, and they are regularly updated by our own members when overcrowding occurs. Despite a number of inspections in both services, unbelievably, they have failed to acknowledge and address this scandal. 16 months into this dispute, it is high time they did. Our National Chair will address this dispute in more detail tomorrow. In St Patrick's Mental Health Services, the salary scales of new entrants and promotional posts were unilaterally cut in 2012. Following persistent representation from the local branch, the employer finally agreed to restore salary scales from January 2018. At a time when the ink was still drying from the recent agreement on the pension dispute, St Patrick's reneged on this restoration agreement, initially by delaying settlement past numerous deadlines and subsequently only restoring pay scales by 50%. A swift and efficient coordination of lunchtime protests by the local branch stopped the employer in their tracks, and following an overwhelming 100% ballot in favour of industrial action, their employer relented and honoured the agreement. Delegates, the inadequacies and underinvestment in the child and adolescent mental health services has been highlighted at conference and other forums over many years. However, the inadequacies and underinvestment persist with severe consequences for staff, service users and families up and down the country. There is now a shortfall of 12 day hospitals with the closure of Lindara Day Hospital recently. There are only 66 of the recommended 100 beds in Vision for Change are operational. The multidisciplinary teams remain inadequately resourced, and the waiting list for first-time assessments are over 2,500. There were 81 admissions of children to adult psychiatric units in 2018. Here on our own doorstep here in Wexford, there is no consultant psychiatrist for the area, which has resulted in the child and adolescents consultant from Galway providing a weekend-only service to the Wexford-Waterford region at enormous expense. This is totally unacceptable for the children of this area, and it also impacts on our members in relation to governance and career development. The response from our Minister for Mental Health to resolve the CAMHS crisis. Minister Daly thinks the answer is the introduction of tele-assessments. I repeat, tele-assessments, where the child would be assessed via a remote monitor with the psychiatrist at home and the child with the mental health problem being assessed remotely via a TV monitor. Unbelievable, but sadly true. Well, can I say to Minister Daly that the assessment of mental health problems does not lend itself in any way to this impersonal approach. People with mental health problems need to be assessed on a direct, one-to-one interpersonal basis. I call on the Minister to disband this inappropriate solution to a staffing crisis and introduce meaningful measures to attract staff to the services. At last year's conference, I outlined that one of the joint Oireachtas Committee report recommendations in relation to children, published in October 2017, which the P&A addressed on 2 occasions, was for the provision of first-time assessments by nurses to alleviate the waiting list. I called for the establishment of advanced nurse practitioner posts in relation to this recommendation, and the first steps to this were realised with the establishment of 10 A&P posts last year. This development is very much welcomed, but it needs to be built on a continuous basis with the establishment of more A&P posts, which will further alleviate the waiting list. Delegates, next to the new Children's Hospital, the new Forensic Mental Health Services is the second biggest capital health development. The construction of the new forensic service in Portrane is forecast to be completed by the end of this year, with plans to move from Dundrum to the new facility in the second quarter of 2020. The new development will comprise of 170-bed campus, an increase of over 70 beds from the present number in Dundrum, incorporating a 120-bed forensic hospital, 10-bed child and adolescent mental health unit, 10-bed mental health intellectual disability unit, and a 30-bed intensive care rehabilitation unit. Following numerous requests for engagement in relation to this major development, which has been happening below the radar of media or political scrutiny, eventually engagement commenced last September. After few meetings, it was evident that these engagements would require the assistance of the WRC. The WRC facilitated a monthly meeting of high-level engagement, of which numerous local engagement streams feed into. Separate from this, there is a parallel engagement to resolve the many legacy issues outstanding in the facility in Dundrum. This transfer of services is by far the biggest transfer of mental health services in the state and will bring with it many challenges and opportunities. The biggest challenge will be the staffing, as the additional 74 beds will require approximately 200 additional nurses. When you consider that nationally in mental health services we have 700 vacancies, and as of November last year, then this new development will place a further strain on the recruitment and retention of nurses. We are aware that a number of the nurses will not transfer across the city due to the significant increase in travel time, which may benefit services on the south side of the city. However, the new development may also attract nurses from North Dublin and Louth and Meath, etc., which will negatively impact on the services in these areas. But overall, as we work to resolve these issues around Portrane, I want to acknowledge what is a welcome development that presents our nurses with the opportunity for establishing a world-renowned nurse-led centre of excellence. We will not be wanting in meeting that challenge. As in the mental health sector, intellectual disability service continues to experience recruitment and retention difficulties. Transition, service changes, reconfiguration are the new norm in this sector. Changes in the delivery of care for people with intellectual disabilities throughout the country is proving to be a huge challenge for RNIDs who are feeling increasingly undervalued. This is compounded by the fact that many service managers want the quality of care and experience which the RNID provides, but wish to erase the title of RNID in favour of any other title which has the words social care attached. In the rush to change to a more social model of care, these managers have failed to recognise that the RNID has provided a social model of care for years in tandem with an interface model, a rehabilitation model, and currently a biopsychosocial model. RNIDs have adapted to every change in the model of care throughout the years, whilst continuing to promote good physical and mental health for people with intellectual disabilities. all in the name of nursing. Indeed, to quote Dr. Siobhan O'Halloran, the Chief Nursing Officer, who said on this issue, "People generally do not recognise the importance and the contribution of intellectual disability nurses because the title includes the word nurse. If I said tomorrow that intellectual disability nurses in Ireland are no longer going to be called nurses, but intellectual disability specialists, the whole country would want them." In my report to conference last year, I addressed the fact that Shaping the Future of Intellectual Disability Nursing in Ireland report had yet to be published by the HSE. This report, which identified the future needs and direction of intellectual disability nursing, was finally published and launched in September of last year. The report produced 32 recommendations for the expansion of the skills and nursing roles of RNIDs to encompass a lifespan approach to care for people with intellectual disabilities, from perinatal to end-of-life care. An implementation steering group has just recently been established to oversee the rollout of the recommendations of the report in areas such as education, professional development, policy making and risk management. Our intellectual disability representative, Liam Hamill, is a member of the overarching steering group and is also on the policy development group. It is hoped that this will guide IDE services in the creation and establishment of much needed and more specialised roles for RNIDs. However, the HSE management throughout the country now seem reluctant to accept the existence of this report despite its publication, and current union management engagement meetings in areas such as Aris Atracta and Mullingar have demonstrated this. The P&A will continue in its efforts to ensure that specialist RNID roles become the focus of service configuration around the country, and we will continue to put pressure on the Minister and the HSE to implement the recommendations of the report. Despite the difficulties for nurses working in intellectual disability services, I am pleased to report to conference that the P&A's membership continues to grow in this sector. The formation of a new ID branch in Bray and another branch soon to be formed here in Wexford highlights the increase in industrial relations issues nurses are facing in ID services around the country. This year, the P&A will seek further meetings with the Minister for Disabilities, the HSE and the Department of Health and request them to outline their plan for direct provision of care for people with intellectual disabilities in Ireland. The P&A, with its growing membership in the ID sector, will lead the fight to ensure that RNIDs will be at the forefront of care provision for people with intellectual disabilities. To update you on the progress of the P&A RCSI College of Continuing Professional Development, over the past year, in collaboration with the RCSI, a comprehensive programme was developed, accredited, advertised and delivered. All of these innovative programmes were developed with and are facilitated by subject experts addressing the findings of a needs analysis which was undertaken with the P&A membership. During 2018, a total of 14 programmes were available, and a number of these programmes were delivered on more than one occasion. Examples of the topics covered were assertiveness, the benefits of assertiveness and how to teach it, a model for understanding eating disorders, screening for mental health problems in children, introduction to RAP Wellness Recovery Action Plan, psychosocial interventions in mental health nursing. The P&A RCSI College of Continuing Professional Development is in the early stages of this development, and engagement from the P&A membership has been very positive, with excellent feedback obtained from programme participants. However, we do wish to encourage participation in order to sustain some of the areas and explore new programme offerings over a range of clinical and professional development areas. The need to explore the implementation of blended learning approaches to augment uptake of the programmes and a more regional approach to programme delivery will be considered as we move through 2019. As Horatio moves towards its 14th year, the P&A are once again delighted to sponsor colleagues in participating in the forthcoming Horatio Festival, Participatory Mental Health in Denmark next week, whereby mental health nurses from more than 20 countries worldwide will meet in Copenhagen. These events provide great opportunities for learning, networking, review and discussions with regard to service delivery and quality initiatives across Europe. The Irish delegation, led by Andy, are extremely popular amongst their European counterparts, both in terms of the quality and their presentations, but also in their unique ability to lead the social itinerary. Horatio continues to build as the representative leading voice for psychiatric mental health nursing in Europe and beyond, influencing and advising the various organs of the EU and the WHO on mental health matters and nursing matters. I am also pleased to announce that in 2018, Aisling Culhane was re-elected as General Secretary of Horatio, unanimously achieving first preference votes from 17 countries. Delegates, despite the fact that we are experiencing the greatest recruitment and retention crisis in the history of the mental health services, not to mention that we are in the middle of engagement to agree measures to assist in resolving this crisis, the HSE had unbelievably exacerbated the crisis by imposing an embargo on recruitment. Where would you get it? Which has taken effect in most CHO areas at this stage. I know it is hard to credit. In the past few weeks, we've had numerous calls to head office regarding offers of posts being withdrawn since this embargo took effect at the beginning of April. While at the same time, St Patrick's Private Hospital are advertising for psychiatric nurses with a €3,000 sign-on fee, with newly qualified nurses starting on the 5th point of the scale and having access to both the location and qualification allowance together. The HSE embargo will result in huge numbers of graduates securing positions in St Patrick's and abroad due to the insecurity created by the HSE in relation to this recruitment embargo. It is imperative that the mental health and intellectual disability services are exempt from this embargo. Otherwise, our recruitment and retention crisis will escalate beyond repair. I am calling on the HSE to revoke this embargo with immediate effect to safeguard our frontline services. Delegates, members, committee members and branch officials, I want to thank you all for all your hard work and commitment throughout what has been one of our most challenging and busiest years. I want to thank all the Officer Board, led by Tracy, for their dedication and hard work throughout this year. I want to thank Mary Walsh, our HSE South representative, who is stepping down from the board, for her hard work and valued input over the years, and I wish her all the best in the future. On that note, I also want to wish Noel Giblin every best wishes into the future. I want to thank him for his 12 years on the board, and I think 10 as National Secretary, for his hard work, commitment and organisation skills. And I think, Noel, you'll be remembered for that poster that came out for Vision for Change forever. So thanks very much and all the best. I want to welcome Donald Spillane as the new HSE South Rep. And at this stage, I want to congratulate Niall O'Sullivan in securing the National Secretary position. And commiserations to Barney and Louise, but once again, I think it's very important to contest these positions. I want to congratulate Colette for her re-election and commiserations to Brendan. But again, it's always good to have positions challenged. And I want to wish Declan Duffy onto the board as the new Southeast, Dublin South rep, or Southeast rep. I want to thank all the staff for their tremendous work ethic, dedication and commitment to the P&A during this extremely busy year, and for their perseverance throughout the numerous late nights, many of those, and early mornings. I also want to thank all the wives, husbands and partners of all P&A activists. And of course, I want to thank Leash for all her support and patience. Lots of that. Delegates, this has been an extremely demanding and challenging year, and I have no doubt we have many and bigger challenges ahead of us. However, in the tradition of the P&A, I know we're up for it. With the continued support, determination and commitment of you, the delegates, the Officer Board and our full-time officials, and with our proud history of defending our members' interests and rights, fighting for improvements in the services and the treatment and care of service users, we will face these challenges with the well-renowned P&A resolve. Thank you all.